morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hello, and welcome to the Expansive podcast this week. Really wonderful to have you with us again. And we got a really exciting episode today in line for you, something that's really been bubbling under for Erik and I. And before we check in, before we start, let's just check in with the co-host, my co-host and my co-author for my book, and also my co-ranting partner, because we also do get onto the pod before we get onto the recording before the pod, and we sometimes rant, and we've just had one. We're both sweating from the rant, so we feel much better and much lighter that our lives are such disasters. And that's the point of the pod today. But either way, Erik, how you feeling, bro?
Much better now, thank you.
Yeah, we did say we should have recorded that rant, except it wouldn't be PC. There was a lot of French words coming from us about what's going on.
Dude, I think it's so good, man. You know, you need people in your life that you can vent with and rant with and not have the judgment when you do. And I think this is something I hear about from entrepreneurs all the time, actually, like leaders in general. Is they often feel like they don't have a space where they can just go and vent and just speak about it.
Bitch.
So,
bitch as much as they can. Yeah.
So thank you for holding that space for me. And it's an absolute pleasure holding that space for you.
And it came out of nowhere. We just got on to start recording, and then all of a sudden it was like, what is going on? Who do we need to kill? Why do we need to kill them? And it's kind of in the air at the moment. I don't know what you listeners are going through, but definitely me personally, and Erik can share his own stuff, is I go through these phases where the only way I can describe them is how Eckhart Tolle describes them, and Eckhart Tolle being the famous sort of spiritual teacher, which I went to go watch live and fell asleep at. So very spiritual, but super boring. My God. I mean, I paid so much money to go watch him. I fell asleep at the flipping. I was like, this is terrible. It also shows me that some people are excellent authors and terrible speakers. And so because they write books well, they're not necessarily good speakers. You know, I think you and I are first speakers and then authors. So I imagine we have a different skill set. But either way, Eckhart Tolle calls this process of moving into, I don't know, some level of trauma, the pain body. And in one of his lectures that I didn't fall asleep in, he was explaining that when you drink alcohol, sometimes you move into a pain body. That's why some people are kind of normal and then they go into rage when they drink, or deep depression. And other examples he used was sometimes when females have their moon cycles or their periods, they also for a day or two move into that pain body. And over the last month or so, I've moved into this pain body 2 or 3 times. And I don't even know what triggers it, but no matter what I do, I can't get out of it. I sit in this bubble of resentment, anger, frustration, impatience, melancholy. I mean, I just so many emotions that if you know me, and obviously if you listen to the pod, you know that Erik and I don't carry those emotions. They're very, very scarce. Like they're not around. And to go from this level of constant attunement with meditation and the amount of effort that we put in to move into this bubble of 24 hours of having absolutely no way, no escape from this mental turmoil. And yesterday I went through it and I meditated 4 times and I couldn't get out of it. I went in sauna. I couldn't get out of it. I went to go walk. I couldn't get out of it. I just couldn't get out of it. And this morning, only at about 11 o'clock did I start coming out of it. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to record the podcast. And once or twice, we've actually messaged each other and say, look, I just can't today. I'm not in that space. You know what I mean? So I don't know what's going on for you listeners. If you are going through these bubbles of pain and anguish, and really, you know, it's got nothing to do with your life. Your life could be amazing. I mean, you could have all the trappings of success and all the nuances of what it means to be living a life fully. And then all of a sudden you move into this pain body. So if you're going through it, you're not alone. And if you can't get out of it, you're not alone. I just don't know what's going on. I don't know, you know, retrograde, schmetrograde, equinox, schmeckinox, full moon, schmool moon, blue moon, pink moon. I mean, I don't know how to skin this thing. What's up with you?
Dude, I think it's tough once you're in that space, because what you feel like you need to do is to escape it as quickly as possible. But the reality is, like you've just said, you can do whatever you want and it doesn't break that feeling. And I remember when, like, we can call that survival mode, I guess, in some way. And I remember that during the pandemic, I felt that over and over and over, like that level of survival mode where it doesn't matter what I'm trying to do, whether I'm meditating or exercising or whatever, nothing changes my state. And I've been fortunate, and I think, just in general, the work that we are fortunate we can go, well, I'm just not going to do anything today then. Like, let me just take the day off. Let me just step away from everything. Let me just sit in it for a little bit, and then, I'll emerge tomorrow and I'll try again. I know that's a luxury that we have that often other people might not have. But that was always the most helpful thing to me, is just to go, well, I'm not going to try and fix it today. I'll try and fix it tomorrow. And often something just kind of shifts in between those 2 days. It also made me realize, and it gave me a lot of empathy for what happens when people get stuck in like a deep survival mode, because it's very easy to just dish out advice and just tell people, but just change your state. Just get up and stand in a power pose, or, just listen to music that pumps you up, and all of a sudden you'll feel better. It just doesn't work like that. When there's a certain level of depth, once you cross that threshold into that level of depth,
there's not coming back.
Almost impossible to escape it without some serious intervention.
Yeah.
And what I remember thinking back then, and what was part of Dangerous, was that what you need to try and do is to accept that this is a tough spot, and you might not be able to crack it straight away. But what you can try and do is see if tomorrow morning you can get yourself into a slightly better state just for even an hour. Can you just try and get yourself emotionally into a better state, even if it's for a very short amount of time? Because if you can feel a little bit better, then perhaps you can think a bit more clearly, then perhaps you can take a bit more constructive action. And even if for an hour that day, that's all you manage, great. You've done more than you did the previous day. And what you then find is that getting yourself, if you're really deep into that hole, getting yourself out of it is just the process of keeping that cycle going. Okay, the next morning, maybe you've seen some results, and because you've taken some action, you've maybe tidied up your room a bit, you feel a bit more clear, you feel a bit more momentum, and therefore you take a bit more action, you see a bit more results, and slowly but surely then you kind of work your way out of it. So it's a very long-winded way of just saying, when people are in that deep state of survival mode or in that deep pain body, don't think that you can dish out advice that's going to help them change their state in one go. It's going to take a bit of time, and that's also okay.
Look, I well said. I also think that it's important to know how to hold space for that,
Yeah.
And this is what you're talking about, is how do you hold space for somebody who's going through that? It's just, you need to be sitting with them or actually leave them alone. And what I told some people around me yesterday is let's not speak today. I'll get back to you tomorrow. And they're like, everything okay? I'm like, I'm just not in a good space. And they're like, why? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why I'm not in a good space. I just need to go and do my own thing, And I don't know if it's I'm also Cancerian. And, with Cancerians, we've got a shell. I almost have to retract into my shell to figure out what's going on. And by all sort of lists, or by all means, we live successful lives. You know what I mean? I was just telling you, I'm going to Spain. I'm staying in an amazing hotel. I'm doing a huge client. And then I'm flying straight to Joburg. I'm doing a huge client. I'm living.
Speaking for a huge client. Yes.
What did I say?
You said doing a huge client.
Calm down. You don't have to go there. Yes, I'm doing.
What line of work are you in these days, Mr. Sanei?
Look, that's for another pod. That's for another pod. Yeah. Speaking for some huge clients. So, in other words, I'm living my dream, and I'm still suffering from pain body. And I think it's really got to do with not trying to force yourself to get out of it, to actually sit in it and stew in it. Because I also think what we do often is we do everything we can not to be in that mood, right? So the minute that mood starts coming, what we do is okay, no, affirmation, no, meditate, no, tap, okay, run, okay, go to the dogs, okay, just do something just to not to be there. And I remember Oneness University, this Indian university I studied with 20 years ago, and they always said the thing that you have to do is you have to sit with your emotions. And when you sit with your emotions, they only have a period of time to work through. That's why you don't stay happy for long, because your happiness is exactly the same type of emotion as anger, as jealousy, as whatever the case may be. They're all one orchestra of instruments. And what we do in our society is the minute one of those negative ones come up, or the ones we've deemed negative, we say, no, I don't want to feel that. So I sometimes feel that this pain body is actually forcing me to sit with those emotions that I've avoided and have had coping mechanisms for throughout that time. And I remember a friend of mine who passed away now. I mean, he was an amazing teacher. He used to take leaders into the bush for 7 days to reset their algorithm. What's it called? Circadian rhythm. Because the first 3-4 days, you're still in the city circadian, and then you get to nature. After 3-4 days, you start getting into nature's circadian. And he used to say that positive thinking is the worst thing ever, because what you do is you lopside your consciousness. And what you have to have is a more balanced consciousness. And I remember thinking, when I first heard him said that, I'm like, what a loser. I would never do that. And as I'm starting to grow, I'm starting to realize there is no escaping those emotions. There's only sitting with those emotions. There's only giving those emotions time to breathe, So maybe that's what the pain body is. You get into that sort of loop.
Yeah. I think the way I'm hearing what you're saying is that we quick to express emotions like happiness and joy, but we don't, we feel like we can't express sadness or frustration or anger.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is why that expression is actually so good, and that's why the venting session was so good, because it wasn't just talking, right? It's almost like, it's like letting energy out, which feels great. Like if we were trying to record this pod just an hour ago, it would have been a very different energy on the pod.
Very different pod. Very different.
But releasing it is, I wonder if that's also why, have you seen those rage rooms that have become quite the thing?
Yes.
I wonder if how that TV does, I'd love to know how that does for people's psyche.
When I see somebody going through something, I always say to them, go and get a boxing bag and go and punch that boxing bag. Go and kick that boxing bag, because also in our modern lives, you don't have that physical anger that's allowed to come out through physicality. And, gym does help me a lot, because you're like pushing, you're like straining yourself. But punching and kicking, I think, is a very, very important thing when you're going through that phase. I'm actually going to do that next time I'm going through my pain body. And then the other one is, I remember when I lived in Cape Town, I used to run on Table Mountain, grunting and screaming just by myself. And just like, just like constantly like trying to get that out of my system, more and more. So, so I guess the point of this part of the pod is, if you're going through it, you're not alone, dude. You're just not. And dudesses. It's something that's going on out there. You know what I mean? It's the pressure of what's going on.
It's also just part of life, and part of the fact that we are so busy with so many things, and unfortunately we don't get to give the space to everything that needs the space, or the processing to everything that needs the processing. Dan over the weekend was busy, like, it amazes me when I see TikToks about how stereotypical like wives can be. And I saw this TikTok a while ago about like your wife waking up on a random Saturday morning and like you still fast asleep, and she's like, today is the day where you spring clean the house. And that was Dan. That was Dan on Saturday. Like wakes up and like it feels like she just chooses violence straight off the bat. She's like, today we're fixing this house. I'm like, this is the last thing that I feel like doing today. But she gets this like bee in her bonnet, and then she's like, okay, now like everything is getting sorted out. And afterwards she felt so good. And it's because everything has been so busy, and she hasn't been able to pay attention to the house in the way that she would like to pay attention to it. And then once she's done that, now she feels great again. And she came out of that like actually beaming. And I helped a lot, and I wasn't beaming, but it was a good thing for her.
No. Let me just back up. Let me back up there. No. Dan would like your input here, please. Please make comments, send me a voice note, whatever. You hesitated twice. I had a lot, was a much bigger. You helped a very little, disgruntledly. And I love what you said. She chose war. She woke up and chose war on a Saturday. Can we make love? No. It's about time to go to war. Let's go to war. Oh, God. So that's great. That's great. So, I'm writing Future Memories at the moment, and I'm talking about the 4 sights that we have. And I'm sure you're familiar with them. But when I wrote Foresight, I was trying to get people to realize, it was my 3rd book. I was trying to get people to realize 2 things. One, you got to access your genius before you can actually become something and really, really move into that space of flow and accessing who you are. And your life's work is about accessing your genius, not anything else. Because once you access your genius, everything else seems quite obvious. Although for the last 2 days, I don't think I've accessed anything. So anyway, besides that, that's a caveat. But the other thing I did in that book was explain how we view the world, right? We view it in hindsight, plain sight, insight, and foresight. And just to like break them down again, and then we'll go on to the insight aspect, which is what we were talking about before the pod. And I think it's such an important thing for you to bring up is we, without realizing it, we look at the world in hindsight. And this is exactly what Dr. Joe's work talks about is 90% of our thoughts are from yesterday. We solving yesterday's problems, dealing with yesterday's traumas, and we aren't really accessing our genius. We have no foresight. We only have hindsight, or we suffer from plain sight. And plain sight are people that don't believe that the reality we live in is subjective. They believe that reality is objective. It's like no matter what you do, your input is irrelevant. Reality is just bringing back to you what it needs to. It's another way of saying Newtonian science. And Newtonian science has now been proven 180 degrees wrong by quantum science, because quantum science says everything's echoing back to us. Newtonian science, no, it's objective. So plain sight people suffer from logic, not magic, so they're stuck in that type of thinking. And they think that anybody who thinks in magic or believes in magic is ridiculous and woo-woo, right? And we have a few of those friends online who do that, but that's okay. And then the third type of person is somebody who's caught up in insight. And insight is when you're very, very clever, but you have no adaptability. And most of the world is stuck between hindsight, plain sight, and insight. And so what is insight? You are highly intellectual, you are highly judgmental, and you are highly structured in the way that you see the world. And if somebody doesn't fit into your structure, you can't deal with it. And so if you think about all the people that are highly qualified, that have got PhDs and doctorates and all those things, they suffer from insight, high levels of insight, but low levels of adaptability. And the reason is that you've built a life and a brand based on your insights and your education and who you are and what you're about. Now, when something new comes, it's actually scary and you'll fight against it vis-a-vis most corporates in the world. Why? Because the corporates have built their careers based on their MBA and where it came from, and then their PhD, and then their doctorate. And now the world's changing and none of that means anything. And now you got to go study agentic thinking from a 21-year-old teaching you something on YouTube, making 8,000 times more money than you. And you're like, what? What is going on? Like, this is ridiculous. That's rubbish. And so you rubbish everything. Yeah. Another part of our rant before we got on here, another caveat is like, I was watching somebody teaching agentic thinking and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on here. What is going on? Why do I not understand this language? Anyway, and then the last piece is foresight, right? Foresight is having the opportunity to be truly adaptable. And when I wrote the book Foresight, really the only two things that I had linking to developing foresight was wisdom and curiosity. And the way I described wisdom back then was healed memories, healed trauma. That's what wisdom is, right? So when you come out of a pain, you come out of trauma and you heal it, you become wise. That's how you build empathy. If you haven't healed your trauma, you're not wise, you're triggered. And then the second piece is curiosity, is making decisions based on with your heart, not your mind, not your logic, not your insights, not your plain sights and not your plain sights. But curiosity is really looking at things based on your unique fascination with the world. Now, when you combine healing your memories and building your life based on curiosity, now you arrive at your genius, because that's really what's governing you in not accessing your genius is trauma and making logical decisions. So I'm going to set that up, and then you go into our experience of dealing with people in insight and that sort of like pain that they create for themselves.
Well, I actually think you kind of phrased it in an interesting way. You said suffer from insight, which is an interesting framing of it, because
yes.
I think what happens is that insight is a great gift, but any gift that is pushed too far becomes a curse. And so, for example, if you are someone who wants to always do things right, that's a great thing. There's a lot of value in someone who is highly competent to make sure that things get done right. Pushed too far, it becomes perfectionism. And perfectionism can then get in the way of you doing things that need to get done. And so all of a sudden, your gift becomes your curse. And I think insight is quite similar to that when you have insight and you're operating from a highly intellectual state, what you are doing is you are looking at the world and you're going, well, where can it be better? Where are things perhaps not the way it should be? What is the argument for this, but also what is the argument against this? And so it's good because you're always kind of in the state where you're evaluating what's happening in the world around you. You're not just taking it for granted. But the problem is, and this is where I think, if insight as the gift becomes the curse, is that you start turning that lens inwards towards yourself. And now all of a sudden you become highly critical, highly judgmental about yourself. So you're not just putting that lens onto the world and trying to figure out what is the best out there, but now it's something that a constant conversation about criticizing yourself. And of course, if you are doing that all the time, you will find every single reason for why you aren't good enough, smart enough, far enough. It becomes this constant companion that's just pushing you down the entire time, questioning every single action that you take, every single thing that you put out into the world. And again, like, where does that leave you then? It affects your self-esteem. It affects your confidence over time. And so I think it's a great lesson in the fact that your gift easily becomes your curse. And it's so important for us to be mindful of like the things that we do well, but never let the external affect the internal. Never use that gift to minimize or diminish yourself, because it happens so easily. And I used to do that all the time, which is why I feel like I can speak about it quite authoritatively. Is that judgment used to be and we've spoken about this in the pod, so I won't rehash too much of it, but it used to be a very big thing for me. Whenever my business isn't doing well, like harsh judgment on why it's not doing well. And it won't just be the judgment on the business. Of course, that begins then to extend into, oh, well, like, you're a failure. Like, why aren't you doing better? Like, and then it becomes this comparison game, and then it just downward spirals. And then I would see a keynote speaker that is maybe doing better than I am at the moment, or speaking somewhere where I'm not speaking. And I'm like, why would they choose them to go and speak there and not me? And then I'm judging them. And all of a sudden, I was telling Dan the other day, at some point, I lost the ability to actually enjoy the art of speaking. Meaning, I could almost not look at any speaker and just enjoy them speaking. I would be so highly critical of everything. Like, oh, like this intro, like what a bad intro. Oh, like, you could have made this point so much better. Like, I couldn't enjoy the art of it anymore. And if you're like, if you're a cricket player or a golfer, like, you should enjoy watching the sport. You know what I mean? You should enjoy.
I mean, I used to be a restaurateur, and when I was a restaurateur, I couldn't enjoy any restaurant.
Couldn't enjoy the food. But you should be able
enjoy
to
the service, the ambience, the music.
Yeah. Like Gordon Ramsay, I'm sure he enjoys being served good food. And, Tiger Woods, like the best player of all time, I'm sure he just enjoys watching golf without that critical thing all the time. So,
I don't know if they do. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know if they do, especially Gordon Ramsay. I mean, he's built a brand on being brash about
hating it. But surely it's like, it's a thing that you enjoy. Like, it's anyway.
Isn't that your gift becoming your curse? There,
I think it is. It might be. It's a version of that.
Yeah.
Because I want to enjoy like talks. Like, I guess our relationship is different. So when I listen to you talk, I get to just enjoy it. I don't sit in that talk critical and overthinking it. Whereas I was listening to a speaker the other day, and all of a sudden, it was also a very bad talk. So
obviously,
you have to also, like,
they all are.
Objectively, there are certain talks that are just bad. But I want to just be able to enjoy those things. And so all I'm trying to say is that if you find yourself very judgmental to the outside, or very critical or competitive, like, what's bound to happen is that even though those things might be good in certain doses, push to the extreme, it's going to make you very unhappy externally. But push to a further extreme, you're going to take that external lens and turn it inward, and then it's really going to spiral you. So just kind of be aware of where those limits are.
Yeah, very good. And also, the people who suffer from insight have no flow. There's no flow. There's no adaptability. There's a very lack of engaging. I often see it at airports. And I think I've said this on the pod. I remember seeing this guy at the airport and wearing his head to toe Gucci tracksuit. I mean, dude, do I judge that? I mean, from a mile away, I'm like, what a muppet. Like, when people wear clothes like that, they have to attach themselves to a brand. And then the part of the play is that they nonchalance about the fact that they're wearing a 10,000 Rand, $3,000 tracksuit on a plane, maybe even sitting in economy, but let's not judge that part of it. But they've got this thing about them that they are now nonchalant, but they're wearing a $3,000 tracksuit. And this was the part that caught me, he was the most irritated in the line waiting for passports. And I was like, dude, with all that money and all that showing off, maybe you don't even have money, but that's what it is. Your ability to stay in flow is gone. It's gone. You don't even have it. And so where's the real luxury? Standing around with your $3,000 tracksuit, or actually just being relaxed? Relax, bro. There's nothing, you're throwing your toys out the cot's not helping anybody. And so it's that people suffer from insight, and we see it, right? We see it in all our clients, is that they're just stuck and they don't know what else to do. And they're stuck in that criticality. And we have friends that do this. And we have a few friends that are highly intellectual, but then create a group of friends around them that are as intellectual as them. And then they get together and then judge the world based on their own criticality of debate and of this right, that's wrong, why they do this, why they do that, instead of just shutting up and doing your own work and getting caught up in your own curiosity and wisdom. I mean, what a difference of energy. So I think if anybody is going,
so, we can talk about this through the lens of balancing mind and heart, right? And like, if you are too in your mind, like too in your head, then you're going to end up being highly critical.
Yes.
And the advice would be, okay, you need to kind of drop into your heart a little bit more.
Yes.
But the question I have for you is, do you think that there's you can also over-index on heart, so that you are too much heart and not enough mind and head?
Have you been to Kalk Bay? Have you been to Simonstown?
I mean, I have, but you'll have to give our international listeners some context.
Yeah, for our listeners who don't know Cape Town, on the south of Cape Town, and if any of my friends are from that part of the world listening, I love you hippies. I love all you hippies. Put your shoes on and wash your hair, but I love all of you. I go to Simonstown and Kalk Bay when I'm in Cape Town. I love it there. It's so cute and so relaxed, and everybody's a hippie dippy smoking far too much weed all day, all night. Yes, of course. You get those people that are stuck in anti-technology, anti-this, anti-that. Everything's about Earth. And yes, I guess that is some perspective, but it's far too much heart, not enough structure. And these people are usually very airy-fairy and very stuck in their dreamland. They're in dreamland. And they're doing all the spiritual work, but zero money relationship, structure of business, applying themselves in any way. So 100%. Now, my favorite meditation right now with Dr. Joe is called Mindful Heart, Heartful Mind. Have I sent it to you? Do you have it?
I don't think so.
I sent it to you, but anyway, I'll send it to you again. But it's a walking meditation. It's an hour and 10 minutes. But obviously, when I'm on a plane, I can't walk. And so I've been doing sitting. And for the hour and the 10 minutes, most of it, what he's trying to do is get you to connect your heart and your mind. And, oh man, it is one of the most beautiful experiences. And, I often say to my friends that I do this with is, when's the last time you actually thought about your brain? And when's the last time you sent love to your brain? When's the last time you focused on your brain and said, thank you for making me me? And what he does, he goes deep into it. Think of the left side of your brain. Think of the right side of your brain. Connect your brain. Now think of your heart. Now think about your heart and your brain. Heartful mind, mindful heart. And it's exactly that. It's that balance of flow and focus. Focus and flow and focus. And it's this constant toy between the two. Again, it's another way of saying the balance between masculine and feminine. And your heart is very feminine, your brain is very masculine. So you really want to be able to balance those. So yes, absolutely, you need a balance.
I think the theme of today's pod really is that we have to learn to hold ourselves lightly. Because, we're all going through this experience called life. It has many, many challenges. And on top of those many, many challenges, we also come preloaded over time with all of these beliefs and ideas and assumptions about the world and about ourselves. And we think for a long time that it's exactly the way it should be, and then we realize that actually, like, how we used to think about it is the wrong way.
Totally
I sent out an email this weekend that spoke about the fact that pre-weather forecasting, how they used to predict the weather. Or let me like tee this up properly. Imagine that this morning you woke up, you grabbed your coffee, you got dressed in your nice clothing, you put on your perfume because you want to smell good for the day, and then you went outside and you grabbed your weather frog to see what the weather is going to be like today. Like, that would be like a very weird thing for us to go and do. But back in the 80s, before weather forecasting, weather frogs were a thing, and a weather frog was literally, they would capture a tree frog, put it in a jar, and there's some water in the jar, and there's a little ladder in the jar as well. And then every day you go look at your weather frog, and if the frog is sitting on the ladder, it means that it's going to be a good, like, sunshiny day. And if the frog was sitting in the water, then it meant some terrible weather was imminent.
No way.
And so people believed this for a very long time. And
is it true?
Then one day they realized, well, that's what their belief was, that on warm days it climbs the trees, and on colder days it stays below. But what they didn't realize was that the reason it climbed the trees wasn't because of the heat. It was because that's where their food source is. So they just climbed to go after the food. And so ultimately they constructed this entire system, this weather station, based on a false belief. And we do this in our lives all the time, and at some point in your life, you got taught something about the world, or you developed some assumption or some belief, and you built an entire identity or behavior around that, only to realize, dude, it was a weather frog. It was built on the wrong assumption, the wrong belief.
I think cigarettes was like that. Alcohol has been like that. Margarine has been like that. We're talking the other day about smoking on a plane. Do you remember people used to smoke on a plane? And you now think about that, and I'm like, I would die. Like, what are you talking about, people smoking on a plane? And those were the stories that we had told ourselves, besides all the psychological stories and superstitions that we've created. But, I feel like why I stopped following Scott Galloway is the exact, I can't even watch anything from him. He turns my insides inside out all of a sudden. And
that's weird.
And so weird. But it was because of the belief system that I had shared with him on the democratic side of the world, and the wokeness that he has. And he's co-host, the most woke person in the world. Oh my God, she drives me mad. So judgmental. Oh my God, she's so judgmental of the world and so angry with the world and so woke. I can't listen to it at all. And when I clicked over that belief system and realized that all of us have been duped for the longest time by BBC and CNN and MSNBC, and all of them have been duping us. That's it. The narrative has been so clear now that you wake up to it, that I've just totally woken up into a different reality because of this ridiculous notion. And it's exactly that. For 49 years of my life, I was so democratic and so left-leaning and in that world. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa, what just happened? So yes, I have had a wide awake, like, kick in the butt because of just becoming aware of this, I don't know, this duping of the system that we've all been sort of duped into.
Yeah.
You started off what you just said about softening. And I just wanted to say this, that a while back I did a psychedelic ceremony. I think I told you about it, that I was reflecting on things that I wanted to fix in my life. And there was one specific thing that I was speaking to myself about, like, I really need to fix this. And the voice that came back into my head, obviously from the psychedelics or my higher self or whatever you want to call it, and it said, you don't have to fix anything. You have to soften yourself towards it. You have to accept that aspect of yourself, not try and fix it. Fixing it is not the challenge. The challenge is accepting. And once you accept and soften, you release that idea. Now, if you think about what religion has done to us for the last thousands and thousands of years, there's a continuous pressure on us to fix parts of ourselves. You are a sinner. You should be doing more. You're not worthy enough. You should be apologizing. There's this constant barrage of fix, not accept. And I think the shift from fix to accept releases any pressure, any story that we've got going on, to soften. And that's been a great practice for me. Is like, even in my pain body experiences, soften towards it. You don't have to fix it. Like, just relax with it. You know what I mean? It will evolve. Just like everything evolves, it will evolve. Just have to sit with it. So yeah, I thought that softening was a beautiful term. And I think it's important for us to share that, you know?
It reminds me of that. It's like a quote that says, you know, if you want to get the dirt out of the water, just don't stir it. Let it all settle at the bottom. I can't remember what the quote is, but it's something about stillness, and it kind of feels like the same thing. You know, it's not like, don't grab a thing and filter it and, like, you know, try and do all these things. Just rest, just let it be for a little bit, and then it'll settle.
Exactly.
Dude, well, thank you.
That was an excellent pod. Thank you so much. I think we should have recorded the rant beforehand as a comedy to show what happens behind the scenes.
Yes.
So horror comedy. I was literally sweating. Literally. I was sitting there. I was like, oh my God, I need to get towel before we start this pod. But thank you so much for holding the space. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on today's pod. Next week, we'll be talking about charisma and the 6 ways to become as charismatic as possible, as they are called today, Riz, for us to pick up some Riz. So next week, we'll be doing that around Riz. And something that, you know, you realize that Riz can actually be learned. It's not something that you're born with. Some people are obviously born with it, but you can learn it. And we'll go through those points next week. But for this week, thank you so much for joining us again and spending this time with us. If you would like, please do leave us a review. We always love receiving them. Please send us any messages that you want to share with us, and also tell us what you would like us to talk about. If there's anything specific you want us to focus on. And for all my friends, I just want to say this quickly. I get messages from friends that, like, oh, I listened to your pod. And I'm like, geez, I didn't even realize you listened to the pod. Like, I'd forgotten that you listened to the pod, or I didn't even know you listened to the pod. And I just want to say thank you so much. You know, I often realize that when you're friends with somebody, you don't really listen to their pod because you spend time with them. So why would you want to listen to their pod? So the fact that you are listening to the pod and you're my friend and we spend time together means that you're my only real friends. All my other friends that don't listen to the pod, they're useless mofos. No, I'm joking. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. It's awesome to have you along. And until next week, stay expansive.